Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to decode something called Public Law 119-21. Now, I know, the name sounds super formal, but trust me, this one law is about to change, well, a lot. We're talking everything from your tax bill to our national defense strategy. It is dense, it is complex, so let's break down what it actually means for you.
All right, let's just jump right in. Look, this is not some minor tweak to an existing rule. We are talking about a massive, single law that completely overhauls tax policy, redirects billions in defense spending, basically reverses the country's environmental direction, and reshapes the rules for major social programs. It's a huge deal. So, how do we even begin to tackle something this big? Well, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll get the big picture, then we'll dive right into what it means for your wallet, our national security, the environment, and finally, some major social programs. Okay, first up, what is this thing? Let's just get a sense of the scale we're dealing with here. So this is what's known as an omnibus bill. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like one of those giant combo meals. It bundles together dozens of totally separate policy changes into one massive package that gets voted on all at once. It's a way to reshape huge chunks of American life in a single go. All right, that's the how. But what you really want to know is, how does this actually affect you? So let's start with the place most of us feel it first, our wallets. Okay, so one of the biggest changes for a lot of people has to do with the standard deduction. That's the flat amount you get to subtract from your income to lower your tax bill. There was a temporary increase that was about to disappear, but this new law makes that higher deduction permanent. For millions and millions of households, that means a simpler tax return and, more importantly, a lower tax bill for years to come. Then there's a whole thing with the state and local tax deduction. You probably know it as SALT. It's been super controversial. The old cap was just $10,000. Well, this law jacks that up to over $40,000 for a lot of families. Now, it's not permanent. It only kicks in for a few years starting in 2026. But for people in higher tax states, that is going to be some serious, if temporary, relief. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, the law also boosts the child tax credit. It makes a key deduction for small businesses permanent, and it even has a rule that cuts off unemployment benefits for people making over $1 million a year. It really, truly touches pretty much every corner of the tax code. But this law is about way more than just taxes. It also moves billions of dollars around, basically making a huge statement about our national security priorities. One of the clearest signals here is a massive investment in next-gen tech. The law sets aside an extra $2.2 billion just to speed up the development of hypersonic defense systems. I mean, that's a pretty big tell about where the focus is shifting. And when you follow the money, you start to see a really clear strategy taking shape. This isn't just random spending. There's a big focus on advanced missile defense, a definite pivot toward military readiness in the Indo-Pacific region, and even money for things like updating barracks for our troops. It's a really comprehensive shift in defense priorities. All right, next up, this is probably the most dramatic U-turn in the entire law. Let's dig into how it completely rewrites the country's environmental policy. The approach here is, well, it's not subtle. The law starts by completely repealing the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This was a multi-billion-dollar program designed to fund green energy projects. And notice the word repealed. It's not just defunded. The entire program is just gone. And it keeps going. The law also rescinds a bunch of funding. Now, rescind is just a fancy word for taking back money that's already been approved but hasn't been spent yet. And first on the list, all the unspent money for environmental and climate justice block grants. And you see this pattern over and over again. Funding for clean heavy-duty vehicles? Cut. Methane emissions reduction? Cut. Neighborhood access grants? Also cut. When you step back and look at the whole picture, it is a systematic takedown of the country's previous environmental funding strategy. Okay, last but not least, let's look at how this law overhauls some of the country's biggest social programs. We're talking major changes to food assistance and healthcare, mostly by changing who's eligible and adding new requirements. So to get what's happening with the food assistance program, SNAP, you gotta understand the starting point. The benefits are all based on something called the Thrifty Food Plan. It sounds kind of old-timey, but it's basically the USDA's official estimate of what it costs to buy a healthy, low-cost diet for a family of 4. This plan is the foundation for everything else. All right, so with that in mind, let's look at the new rules. For able-bodied adults who don't have dependents, the work requirements are getting a lot stricter. They're doing this by changing who gets an exemption. For instance, the age where you're automatically exempt from the work rules, it used to be 50, Now it's been raised all the way up to 65. The law also adds this new accountability measure, but it's aimed at the states that run the program. The idea is pretty straightforward. If a state has a high rate of making incorrect payments, either overpayments or underpayments, that state is now on the hook for part of the cost. The higher your error rate, the more you have to pay out of your own pocket.
And we see a very similar idea on the healthcare side of things. The law is bringing in a new community engagement requirement for some adults on Medicaid. That means they'll have to either work, volunteer, or be in some kind of education program to keep their benefits.
So, when you pull it all together, 4 really clear themes just jump right out. First, it makes some major middle-class tax relief permanent. Second, it pumps a lot of new money into very specific defense technologies and regions. Third, it pretty systematically repeals or claws back funding for a whole host of environmental programs. And finally, it puts stricter work and accountability rules in place for big social programs like SNAP and Medicaid. Look, in the end, Public Law 11921 isn't just a list of new rules, it's a roadmap. It's charting a very different course for the country on almost every big issue we have. So the question it leaves us with is a big one. Where is this new course actually going to lead?